The gallery I built with my art was celebrating its 10th anniversary. They said it was a party for me, but when I arrived, my most personal painting, the one I swore I'd never sell, had a red sold sticker on it. The video opens on a woman in her early 30s, standing in a stark white, nearly empty room. It's clearly an art studio, but the easels are bare. Canvases are stacked against a wall wrapped in plastic. She holds a single, old paintbrush, running her thumb over the worn bristles. She looks directly at the camera, her expression calm, but with a deep, settled sadness in her eyes. The 10-year anniversary invitation for the Vance Gallery was printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold-embossed lettering. It read, "Celebrating a decade of artistic vision." My mother, Eleanor, had designed it herself. She'd held it up to the light in my studio, her manicured nails tapping the corner. Isn't it exquisite, Maya? Simple, elegant, just like the brand we've built. That word was doing a lot of heavy lifting. When the official night came, I found out just how much. The party was supposed to be a celebration of my work, a tribute to the 10 years of my life I had poured onto canvases, the very foundation of the gallery's existence. But as I stood in the doorway of my own creative home, watching the champagne flow and the city's elite mingle, I saw the massive vinyl banner strung above the main hall. It didn't say, "Celebrating Maya Vance." It didn't even mention my name. It just read, "The Vance Gallery, the next chapter." And that's when I saw it. Across the crowded room, illuminated by a single dramatic spotlight, was my grandfather's portrait. The helmsman. It was the first piece I ever painted that felt truly mine. A raw, emotional rendering of him at the helm of his fishing boat. His face a roadmap of sea salt and laughter. I'd sworn it would never be for sale. It was the only piece in the entire gallery that was permanently marked not for sale. But tonight, tucked into the bottom right corner of its ornate gold frame, was a small, blood-red sticker. Sold. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't make a scene. I just turned around, walked out of the gallery, went up the back stairs to my studio, and logged onto my laptop. With 3 clicks, I revoked the Vance Gallery's license to represent, display, or sell any and all of my works, effective immediately. Then, I started packing. My phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days. My brother called, furious. My mother called, hysterical. But it wasn't until a certified letter from their lawyer arrived, threatening to sue me for catastrophic breach of familial and professional contract, that I finally understood. They didn't see me as their daughter or their sister. I was their asset, and I had just liquidated myself. My name is Maya Vance, and for the last decade, I haven't been an artist so much as an engine. The Vance Gallery isn't just a family business. It's a beautifully curated cage I built for myself. We opened it 10 years ago, just after my father died. He was the glue of our family, the practical, steady one, and his sudden heart attack left us emotionally and financially adrift. My mother, Eleanor, a woman who always valued aesthetics over balance sheets, was falling apart. My brother Leo, fresh out of business school with a mountain of debt and a surplus of unearned confidence, had no viable job prospects. And me? I had my art. It was my grief, my escape, my entire world. It was my mother's idea. "Maya, darling," she'd said, her hand on my arm, her eyes filled with a terrifying blend of desperation and ambition. Your talent, it's a gift. It can be our salvation. She envisioned a high-end gallery in the city's most affluent district. Leo would handle the business. She would be the curator and face of the brand. And I would be the soul. The artist in residence, tucked away in the sprawling studio apartment above the gallery floor. It sounded like a dream. A way to keep my family together, to turn my passion into a legacy. For the first few years, it felt like one. The critics adored my work. My early pieces, full of raw emotion and experimental color palettes, sold almost before the paint was dry. The Vance Gallery became a name whispered in exclusive circles. Eleanor was brilliant at networking, a goddess in a Chanel suit who could charm collectors into buying pieces they didn't know they wanted. Leo, for all his faults, knew how to talk numbers and close a deal. And me? I just had to paint. I lived and breathed turpentine and linseed oil. My world was the canvas, the quiet hum of the city outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, and the pressure of the empty walls downstairs. The gallery was a hungry beast, and I was its only source of food. I worked on a relentless schedule. 4 major pieces for the spring collection. 6 for the fall gala. A dozen smaller studies for the holiday rush. My life was measured in exhibitions. My personal identity became inextricably linked to the Vance brand. In interviews, my mother would speak poetically about nurturing my gift, while Leo would talk about monetizing a unique creative pipeline. They never talked about the 70-hour weeks. They never mentioned the times I'd paint until my hands cramped and my vision blurred, fueled by coffee and the fear of letting them down. They didn't see the artist. They saw the product, and I let them. I convinced myself it was a noble sacrifice. This wasn't just a job. It was for family. Every sold painting paid for my mother's mortgage on her beautiful brownstone. It funded Leo's lavish lifestyle, his European cars and designer watches. It propped up the entire Vance name, making us appear stable, successful, and artistically significant. I was the ghost in the machine, the silent partner in my own life. The resentment wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow rising tide. It started with the small things, the little paper cuts to the soul. It was in the way my mother would walk into my studio, glance at a piece I'd poured my heart into for weeks, and say, "It's lovely, darling, but does it have the commercial appeal of the Seascape series? The blues are what's selling right now." It was in Leo's casual remarks during our weekly business meetings. "Hey, May, the hedge fund guys are loving the abstracts. Can you knock out a few more in the 48 by 60-inch range? Easy sellers." Knock out. Like I was an assembly line. Like art was a widget I could produce on demand. I was no longer an artist exploring her vision. I was a short-order cook taking directions from the front of the house. The narrative they spun to the world was one of a perfect symbiotic partnership. Art and commerce in perfect harmony. One magazine headline read, it featured a glossy photo of Eleanor and Leo, clinking champagne glasses in the gallery, while I was a tiny, out-of-focus figure in the background, paint splattered and smiling awkwardly. The caption identified me as resident artist Maya Vance. Not co-founder, not the creative force, resident, as if I were a piece of the decor. They began making decisions without me. They'd accept commissions I had no passion for, promising clients a Vance original in a style I hadn't touched in years. "The client wants another one of your Birch Tree series," Leo would announce. I quoted them 30,000. I hated the Birch Tree series. It was from my earliest, most naive period. Technically simple and emotionally vacant. But it was popular and easy to replicate. So I would stretch another canvas, mix the familiar grays and whites, and dye a little inside with every formulaic brushstroke. My own projects, the ones that truly excited me, were pushed to the side. A series of portraits I wanted to do, exploring the faces of the city's forgotten people, was deemed too gritty by my mother. Who wants to hang poverty on their wall, Maya? It's depressing. We sell beauty here. Escapism. The ultimate symbol of this disconnect was the helmsman. After my father died, my grandfather became my rock. He'd take me out on his old boat, not saying much, just letting the rhythm of the waves and the vastness of the ocean heal me. I painted his portrait as a tribute to that quiet strength. It hung in my private living space for years, until my mother convinced me to display it in the gallery. It shows your range, your heart, she'd argued. It will be the soul of the gallery. Of course it will never be for sale. It's a testament to our family. I believed her. I wrote up the official gallery documentation myself, marking its status as permanently not for sale. It became an anchor for me, a reminder in the sea of commercialism that my true heart was still in there somewhere. But even that was just another asset to them, another story to sell. I'd overhear my mother telling wealthy patrons the tale of the painting, her voice catching with emotion. My late husband's father, Maya poured all of her grief and love into this piece. It's the one thing we could never part with. It was a performance, and the painting was her prop. The resentment simmered, a low heat beneath the surface of my daily life. I was living in a beautiful prison of my own making, paid for by the slow, methodical sale of my own soul. The 10-year anniversary was supposed to change that. It was supposed to be about me. "This is your night, Maya," Leo had said, clapping me on the shoulder. "A decade of your genius. We're finally going to put you front and center." I was foolish enough to believe him. The night of the party was a blur of expensive perfume and hollow compliments. I wore a simple black dress, feeling like a stranger in a room that my own 2 hands had built. The air was thick with the clinking of glasses and the self-important laughter of the city's art-buying elite. I drifted through the crowd, nodding and smiling, a ghost at my own feast. My mother was holding court by the bar, resplendent in a silver gown, telling some journalist from Art Forum about her curatorial philosophy. "One must have an eye not just for beauty," she said, gesturing vaguely at one of my paintings, "but for legacy. We are building a legacy here." She didn't look at me once. Leo was schmoozing a tech billionaire, his slicked back hair gleaming under the gallery lights. "Maya's in a very productive phase right now," I heard him say. "We have a waiting list a mile long. If you're serious, we should talk about a commission. I can probably get you to the top of the list." And he made it sound like he was doing them a favor, like he had to chain me to an easel to get me to work. That's when I saw it. The spotlight, the crowd parting slightly, and the helmsman. For a moment, my heart swelled. They had given it the place of honor. They had remembered. And then my eyes focused on the bottom corner of the frame. The little red dot. It was so small, so innocuous, but it screamed at me from across the room. Sold. A cold wave washed over me, so intense it felt like I was drowning. My breath caught in my chest. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on Leo. He was shaking hands with the tech billionaire, a triumphant, predatory grin on his face. He caught my eye, gave me a subtle wink, and raised his champagne flute in a little toast. He thought I'd be pleased. He thought the money, the prestige of the sale, would be enough. He had no idea what he'd just done. He hadn't just sold a painting. He had sold my grandfather's memory. He had sold the last pure piece of my artistic heart. He had taken the one thing I had explicitly, repeatedly, fiercely protected and put a price tag on it. In that moment, the entire decade-long charade shattered. The polite fiction of the family business, the lie of nurturing my talent, it all crumbled into dust. I wasn't their partner. I was their golden goose, and they had just slit my throat for one last golden egg. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange glacial calm settled over me. I turned my back on the party, on the noise, on the little red sticker. I walked out the front door, circled around to the private staff entrance, and climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my studio. The smell of oil paint and turpentine, usually my comfort, felt suffocating. The room was no longer my sanctuary. It was my cell. I sat down at my desk, the sounds of the party below a muffled, distant mockery. I opened my laptop, my fingers moving with a cold, detached precision. I navigated to the gallery's online backend, the system I had designed myself. I entered my master credentials. Artist profile. Maya Vance. Representation agreement. The Vance Gallery. I clicked edit. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to alter this legal agreement? I clicked yes. Another box. Select new terms. I scrolled down to the bottom option. Revoke all rights and licenses. A final warning flashed on the screen. This action is immediate and irreversible. All works by this artist will be listed as representation terminated, and all sales and display rights will be nullified. I didn't hesitate. I pressed confirm. The screen flickered and then a green banner appeared at the top. Update successful. Then I stood up and pulled out the empty moving boxes I'd had stored in the closet for years. The ones I always told myself were for old canvases. I finally knew what they were really for. The rage didn't come until later. At first, it was just a profound, hollow emptiness. I moved through my studio like an automaton. A ghost in my own life. I started with the brushes, carefully cleaning each one before lining them up in their worn leather roll. Then the paints, screwing the caps on tightly, wiping down the tubes, and placing them into a wooden crate. Each action was deliberate, methodical. It was a funeral rite for the artist I used to be. I didn't sleep. I just packed. Canvases came off the stretcher bars, rolled and tied with twine. Sketchbooks filled with a decade of ideas, dreams, and frustrations were stacked in a box and sealed with tape. I was dismantling my life, piece by piece. The silence was absolute, broken only by the scrape of a box across the floor or the crinkle of packing paper. The buzzing of my phone was a violent intrusion. It started around 3 a.m. Once the party guests had stumbled home, and my mother and brother had likely noticed the glaring representation terminated alert in their sales system. First, It was Leo. I ignored the call. It went to voicemail. He called back immediately. Ignored. Then, a text message. Maya, what the hell did you do? Call me now. I deleted it without reading the rest. Then my mother. Her calls were different, more frantic. I imagined her pacing the gallery floor, her perfect composure finally cracking. I let it ring and ring and ring. The voicemails piled up, a digital monument to their panic. For 10 years, they had been in control. They managed the money, the narrative, the access to my work. My art was the sun around which their little universes revolved. By revoking their license, I hadn't just quit my job. I had turned off their sun. I had single-handedly torpedoed their entire business model overnight. The online gallery, which accounted for 40% of their sales, would now show my entire portfolio as unavailable. Any pending sales would be frozen. Any negotiations Leo was in the middle of would be dead in the water. They couldn't sell a sketch, a print, or a multi-million-dollar oil painting. They couldn't even legally keep my work on their walls. I had, in essence, repossessed my own soul. The full weight of my decision settled on me as the sun began to rise, casting long shadows across my nearly empty studio. This wasn't just about one painting. It was about every compromised vision, every dismissed feeling, every time I was made to feel like a tool instead of a person. Selling the helmsman wasn't the crime. It was just the evidence. The proof that my boundaries, my love, my history, none of it mattered more than a commission check. I walked over to the large window that overlooked the city. I was no longer the artist in residence. I was just a woman in a room with a few boxes and a future that was suddenly terrifyingly, breathtakingly blank. And for the first time in a decade, that felt like freedom. It's funny how you can live inside a cage for so long that you forget the bars are even there. You decorate them, hang your life on them, and call it home. My cage was built with the prettiest materials: love, duty, and family legacy. I walked into it willingly. When my father died, the grief was a physical force, a black hole that threatened to swallow us all. My mother, who had always been the ornamental one, the social director of their marriage, was utterly lost. Leo was just a kid, really, full of bluster, but terrified underneath. My art was the only light we had. I remember the night the gallery was conceived. We were sitting in the sterile quiet of my father's study, surrounded by his books and the faint smell of his pipe tobacco. My mother wasn't crying anymore. She had a new sharp clarity in her eyes. "Your father left us with a good name, but not enough to live on," she said, her voice brittle. "Leo has his degree, but no experience. And you, Maya, you have this incredible, God-given talent. It would be a sin to waste it." She laid out the vision. A family endeavor. A tribute to Dad's belief in us. We would all have a role. We would all be partners. "This will be your gallery, Maya," she promised, taking my paint-stained hands in hers. "Your name, your vision. We'll just be here to handle the tedious business side of things, so you can be free to create." Free to create. That was the hook. And I bit down hard. I remember the first major compromise. I was working on a deeply personal series based on my recurring dreams. Surreal, chaotic landscapes that were difficult and unsettling. I was obsessed with them. They were honest. Leo walked into the studio, saw the dark, swirling canvases, and his face soured. "I can't sell this, May," he said flatly. "It's too weird. It makes people feel bad." A week later, a wealthy couple who had bought one of my earlier, sunnier seascapes came in. They wanted another one, almost identical, to hang in their Hamptons beach house. "They're offering $50,000, Maya," my mother had urged, her voice soft and reasonable. "Think of what that means for the gallery. For us. It would secure our lease for the next year." I looked at my dream-inspired canvas, half finished on the easel. It felt like my blood was on that canvas. Then I looked at my mother, the hope and fear warring in her eyes. So I put away the dreamscape. I stretched a new canvas. I mixed the placid blues and sandy whites, and painted another pretty, soulless ocean. I told myself it was a strategic sacrifice. One for them, one for me. But the ratio slowly, insidiously, shifted. Soon it was 3 for them, then 10 for them. The commissions became more specific, more demanding. Mrs. Vanderbilt wants a portrait of her prize-winning poodle. Mr. Chen needs a large-scale abstract, but the color palette has to match his new sofa. I became a master technician, a high-end decorator, a painter of dogs and furniture accessories. And with every sold piece, the cage got a little more comfortable, the bars a little more gilded. They praised me, of course. "You're a miracle, Maya. You saved this family." They wrapped my compliance in the language of love and gratitude. They made me believe my sacrifice was my purpose. Selling the Helmsman was the culmination of that decade-long lesson. They had successfully taught me that my feelings didn't matter, that my history was negotiable, and that the only true value of my art, and by extension, of me, was its price tag. And my God, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The confrontation came 2 days later. I had ignored dozens of calls and a barrage of increasingly unhinged texts, but I knew they would come. At 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, the buzzer for my studio shrieked. I saw them on the security camera feed. My mother, stone-faced and impeccable in a beige trench coat, and Leo, looking rumpled and furious, pacing behind her. I didn't buzz them in. Let them wait. Let them feel for once what it was like to be on the other side of a locked door. 5 minutes later, Leo started pounding on the service door down the hall. I walked over and opened it, just a crack, leaving the chain on. Leo's face was red with anger. "What the hell, Maya? Open the door." "No," I said calmly. My voice didn't even shake. "We need to talk," my mother said, pushing past Leo. Her voice was cold, controlled. The voice she used when she was about to close a deal or dismiss a staff member. "You have caused an incalculable amount of damage. You are contractually obligated to this gallery." "The contract was predicated on a partnership," I replied, my eyes fixed on hers. "A partnership you dissolved when you put a price on our grandfather's memory." She flinched, the first crack in her porcelain facade. "Don't be so dramatic. It was a business decision, a phenomenal one. Mr. Sterling paid 7 figures for that piece, Maya. 7 figures. Do you know what that means for our future?" "I know what it means for our past," I said, my voice dropping. "It means it's for sale. It means nothing is sacred. Not my work, not my grief, not one single request." Leo scoffed, running a hand through his hair. Oh, get off your high horse. It's a painting. A brilliant one that you painted and I sold. That's how the business works. You know, the business that pays for this giant studio. The one that funds your entire life. That's when the rage I had been suppressing finally ignited. My life? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You think this is a life? I'm a machine in a box that you wheel out when you need another product. You don't see me. You see inventory. You see a walking, talking pipeline of assets. You took my passion, the one pure thing I had after Dad died, and you turned it into a commodity. You packaged it, you branded it, and you sold it piece by piece until there was barely anything left of me. That is not fair, my mother snapped, her composure finally breaking. We gave you everything. We gave you a platform. We built an empire around your talent. No, I said, looking from her face to my brother's. You built an empire on my back. And you got so comfortable, so entitled, that you thought you owned the ground you were standing on. You thought you owned me. You sold the helmsman, Leo. You looked me in the eye, and you sold it. Leo had the grace to look away. He mumbled, Sterling was a huge collector. It was a strategic move for the gallery's prestige. Was it a strategic move to lie to me about it? I pressed. Was it part of the business plan to wait until I was standing in a room full of people to see that you had betrayed me? Silence. The thick, damning silence of guilt. I want the painting back, I said, my voice like ice. Call your billionaire client and tell him the sale was a mistake. An error. It was not for sale. Leo let out a choked, incredulous laugh. Are you insane? The deal is done. The wire transfer is already pending. I can't just cancel a multi-million-dollar art deal. Then you have a very big problem, I said, because as of 48 hours ago, you no longer have the legal right to sell my work. The contract for that sale is fraudulent. And if that painting is not returned to me, I will not only sue you, the gallery, and your buyer, but I will go to every newspaper, magazine, and art blog in this city and tell them the story of how the prestigious Vance Gallery built its empire on lies and exploited its own artist. My mother's face went white. She knew I meant it. The brand, the legacy she had so carefully constructed, was more valuable to her than any amount of money. The threat of public shame, of being exposed as a fraud, was the one weapon she couldn't defend against. You wouldn't, she whispered. I looked her dead in the eye. You sold my grandfather. Watch me. I closed the door in their stunned, horrified faces, slid the deadbolt into place, and for the first time, the silence in my studio felt like peace. It was the sound of my own power returning. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, just as I knew it would be. The next day, Artforum's online gossip column ran a short, cryptic, blind item. Which celebrated family-run gallery is in hot water after their star artist, a family member, abruptly terminated their representation. Rumor has it a deeply personal piece was sold without consent, and now the lawyers are circling. The art world is small and vicious. The blind item was all it took. Within hours, my phone was ringing with calls from rival gallery owners, journalists, and curators, all smelling blood in the water. I didn't answer any of them. I let the silence do the work. My mother and brother, however, went into full-blown panic mode. Leo, I later found out from a sympathetic gallery assistant, had to cancel the sale of the helmsman. The billionaire client, furious and embarrassed, threatened his own lawsuit. 2 other major collectors who had pieces on hold pulled out, citing instability at the gallery. The Vance Gallery, once a pillar of the art scene, was suddenly radioactive. They tried to fight back, of course. Their lawyer sent me another letter, this one more desperate, talking about reconciliation and finding a path forward. It was transparently a move to get me to reinstate their license before they went bankrupt. I had my own lawyer send back a 1-sentence reply. All communication regarding the return of Ms. Vance's unsold inventory is to be directed through this office. The inventory. That was the key. Over 60 pieces of my work, a decade of my life, were still hanging on their walls or sitting in their storeroom. Legally, they couldn't sell them, but they still possessed them. It was their last point of leverage. Or so they thought. My mother tried a different tactic. Emotional warfare. She left long, tearful voicemails. Maya, how can you do this to us? To your father's memory. He would be so ashamed. We are family. You are destroying us over a piece of canvas. Then she even got our extended family involved. My aunt called, telling me I was selfish and ungrateful. My cousin texted that my mother was so stressed she wasn't sleeping. They were trying to build a new cage around me, this one made of guilt. But I was done with cages. I packed the last of my boxes and hired a moving company. I found a small, quiet loft on the other side of the city. A place with good light, but no retail space downstairs. It was just a place to live. While they were scrambling to save their crumbling empire, I was quietly building a new life. I started small. I bought a new set of brushes. I stretched a small canvas. And for the first time in years, I painted for no one but myself. No client, no commission, no theme. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The piece was clumsy and strange, but it was honest. It was mine. A month after the party, I received an email from a woman named Sofia Reyes, the owner of a smaller, highly respected avant-garde gallery downtown. She was the one critic who had always understood the darker, more complex undercurrents in my work, even in my most commercial pieces. Her email was short. I heard what happened. When you're ready to show your real work, give me a call. The art world needs your true voice. Attached was an article. The journalist my mother had been schmoozing at the party had written a feature piece, not on the Vance Gallery's legacy, but on its spectacular implosion. It detailed, with thinly veiled sources, the story of the sold painting, the artist's walkout, and the subsequent financial chaos. The final line of the article was a quote from an anonymous source. They didn't just lose an artist. They killed their muse. Reading those words, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound sense of sorrow. They had been given a gift. My love, my trust, my talent. And they had squandered it. The future was uncertain. The gallery was in ruins. My family was in turmoil, and I was starting from scratch. But I had my name back, and for the first time, I was excited to see what I would sign it on next. The most important lesson in art and in life is learning the value of negative space. It's the silence between the notes that makes the music. It's the empty space around a sculpture that gives it form. It's the moments of quiet that allow you to hear your own voice. For 10 years, my life had been a cacophony of obligations, expectations, and the relentless, hungry demands of the gallery. There was no negative space. My silence, my withdrawal, created it. And in that quiet, I finally began to heal. I learned that talent is not a debt you owe to your family. It is a gift you give to yourself first. My ability to paint was not a resource to be mined, to prop up my mother's social standing or my brother's bank account. It was my language, my way of processing the world. By turning it into a job, a duty, I had silenced myself. I had forgotten my own vocabulary. Reclaiming it was a slow, deliberate process. It meant learning to say no. No to the guilt-tripping phone calls. No to the manipulative family pressure. No to the voice in my own head that whispered I was being selfish. Selfishness, I discovered, is not the same as self-preservation. One is taking from others. The other is protecting what is fundamentally yours. My identity, my spirit, my art, those were mine to protect. I also learned that family is not an unconditional contract. It is a relationship that requires mutual respect, trust, and care. When those things are gone, the word family is just an empty frame. My mother and brother loved the idea of me. They loved the artist, the provider, the asset, but they did not know how to love the person. They didn't know how to respect my boundaries because, in their eyes, I wasn't supposed to have any. I was supposed to be an infinite well of creativity and compliance. The well had run dry. Breaking away wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of creation. I was creating a new life for myself, one where my worth wasn't determined by my last sale price. It was a life where I could wake up and choose to paint or choose to read a book or choose to simply sit by the window and watch the world go by without the crushing weight of someone else's expectations. True freedom, I realized, isn't about having no obligations. It's about choosing your obligations. It's about dedicating your energy to things that nurture you, not just things that use you. I chose to be obligated to my own well-being, to my own artistic integrity. The biggest lesson was the hardest. You cannot make people see your value. You can only assert it for yourself. I had spent a decade trying to earn their respect through my work, hoping that one more successful show, one more rave review, would finally make them see me. It never would have been enough. Their validation was a moving target, always just out of reach, designed to keep me running on their treadmill. The only validation that mattered was my own. Standing in my new empty studio, with nothing but a few boxes and a blank canvas, I felt more valuable than I ever had surrounded by my sold-out collections in the Vance Gallery. I wasn't an asset anymore. I was an artist, and I was finally free. So what happens when you walk away from the life you built? You learn to build a new one, brick by painful, liberating brick. The months that followed were a strange mixture of peaceful solitude and lingering chaos. My lawyer handled the messy business of retrieving my unsold artwork from the gallery. It was a tense, drawn-out process. My brother tried to claim that some of the pieces were gallery assets, purchased by the business. We had to produce the original consignment contracts I had foolishly but thankfully insisted on in the very beginning, proving my sole ownership. The day 2 large moving trucks pulled up to my new loft with my life's work was the day I truly felt the shift. Seeing the canvases again, the good, the bad, the commercial, the personal, was like looking at a photo album of a person I barely recognized. I put them all in storage, except for one, the helmsman. It hangs on the main wall of my loft now, a silent guardian and a constant reminder. The Vance Gallery officially declared bankruptcy 6 months after the party. They couldn't survive without their primary product. The beautiful space in the Arts District now houses a minimalist furniture store. My mother sold her brownstone and moved into a much smaller condo. Leo, stripped of his easy income, had to get a real job in corporate finance. I hear from a mutual acquaintance that he hates it. They don't contact me directly anymore. The anger has curdled into a bitter, resentful silence. On my birthday, a small unsigned card arrived. Inside, in my mother's elegant script, were 2 words. "We hope you're happy." It wasn't an apology. It was an accusation. I didn't respond. As for me, I took Sophia Reyes up on her offer. We met for coffee, and I talked for 2 hours straight. I told her everything. She didn't just listen. She understood. She saw the artist behind the brand. I've been working with her for the past year, not as a resident artist, but as a partner. She's given me the one thing my family never could: total creative freedom. My first solo show at her gallery, titled Negative Space, opened last month. It featured all the work I was told was too dark, too gritty, too unsellable. The portraits of the city's forgotten people, the surreal dreamscapes. It was honest, raw, and unapologetically me. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever done. The show sold out on opening night. The reviews have been overwhelming, not just because the work is good, but because the story behind it resonates. It turns out a lot of people know what it feels like to have their passion turned into a product, to have their voice managed by someone else. And if you're watching this, maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're the brilliant coder whose ideas are always credited to your boss. Maybe you're the family caregiver whose own dreams have been on hold for decades. Maybe you're pouring your soul into something, a project, a business, a relationship, and getting nothing back but an empty cup. If that's you, I want you to hear this. Your talent is not a utility for others to plug into. Your heart is not a commodity to be traded, and your boundaries are not a suggestion. They are the sacred ground where your self-respect lives. Walking away is not failure. Sometimes it's the only way to win back your life. I still have the little red sold sticker. I keep it in a small box on my desk. It doesn't represent a betrayal anymore. It represents a price I was no longer willing to pay. Thank you for listening. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. We all have a story about reclaiming our own narrative. What's yours?